Hello, welcome to the Sideboard here at the StarCityGames.com Open Series in Philadelphia. I'm Nick Miller alongside Todd Anderson. How you doing, sir?
What's up, Nick? How we doing, bud?
Pretty good. We've seen you've been playing Jeskai Black for a while.
Yep.
And we've seen Pantheon play it at the Pro Tour. It's a deck that people know is here. And you won states with it, you have an open top 8 with it. But you wrote an article this week saying, Mantis Rider not where you want to be anymore.
No, Mantis Rider sucks. Kinda.
All right, your words, not mine.
Yeah. Well, actually, I said kinda, but
Yeah.
they changed it because, colloquialisms. Anyway, so for the longest time, I got like a month and change or whatever. I've been playing variations on Jeskai Black, just trying to figure out which version is the best. And I started with a highly experimental version that played like Monastery Mentor,
Yep.
Seeker of the Way. It was very aggressive. I used Dispel alongside Monastery Mentor to just get those huge tempo plays on turn 4 against decks that had 3 mana removal. And for the most part, it was fine. But it just felt worse than what I could be doing. And so ever since Atlanta, where I made top 4 with that version, I've been struggling to figure out what feels good as far as like the correct configuration for the deck goes. And
that brings up states
Yep.
where you tinkered with a deck. You kind of took the stuff Aaron talked about, and then you built a different deck. And at that event, you told me, this deck's great, but I side out Mantis Rider every game.
Yeah, and it could just be that Mantis Rider is a great Game 1 card and just kind of a bad Game 2 and 3 card, or just that the deck wants to transition away from Mantis Rider after Game 1 when you have the proper tools to interact with your opponent on every single important turn. When you get access to cheaper counter spells like Dispel, cheaper removal spells or sweepers like Radiant Flames, good creatures against the mono red deck like a Ration Cleric, the need to have Mantis Rider in your deck is lessened. And if you can have a deck that's just trying to interact with your opponent on turns 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then cast Dig and a removal spell on turn 6, like that's a great place to be in Standard, and that's exactly what I want to be doing.
Right, and that's the huge difference about the way you play the deck and the way you've built the deck. You have the full 4 dig, you cut the Catassigers so you're not competing for delve space, and you plan on winning just these long, grindy games. Dragon Master Outcast bringing it back with 3 Ojutai's command.
Yeah, so since we were talking about Mantis Rider, I just wanted to give it a try and see if it was just unnecessary to actually win games. And all this week on Magic Online, I played Jeskai Black with no Mantis Riders, and my win percentage was very high. However, my clocks were usually pretty low, and that's usually an indicator that the deck is a little slow. And those versions, I was usually just playing 1 Dragon Master Outcast, but I decided to go for 2. If you read my article this past Thursday, I talked a little bit about the deck and stuff. And I think the second Dragon Master Outcast just gives you a little bit of breathing room against decks with things like Utter End that can get rid of it permanently. And also just lets you find it faster with Dig Through Time, so you can actually win the games before you run out of time.
Yeah, that's the huge thing, is you're going to win the game, but how you win that game and if you can win it in time is the thing. And Dragon Master Outcast has just been much better than I expected in this standard format, where it's just a 1-mana 1/1, but you're going to be making your land drops. No one wants to waste a removal spell on this guy, and then a few turns later they can't beat a bunch of dragons.
Yeah, I mean, and you have such strong inevitability with cards like Kolaghan's Command, Ojutai's Command, and Dig Through Time that like your opponents are just going to get so worn down on all their resources unless they're playing a Dig Through Time deck themselves. You have so many spells in your deck that are either 1 for 1 or 2 for 1, and that's all you're really trying to do until you can find Dragon Master Outcast and close the game. Now, if something really awkward happens, and let's say that your Dragon Master Outcast dies, and the second one gets utter-ended, and you've all gone through all of your Ojutai's commands, all of your Kolaghan's commands. I have won games with just activating Soulfire Grandmaster and just Kolaghan's commanding or crackling dooming my opponent to death. So, I mean, things like that can happen. I've also killed people with ultimate on Jace like 4 times now, and there are some other ways to win. They're not pretty, but if you're up on like 7 or 8 cards on your opponent, it doesn't matter how you win.
How you win is irrelevant. You're going to get there at some point. All right. A couple other changes you've switched to your deck. You no longer have Wild Slash. You have a full 4 Fiery Impulse, and then you have some Silk Wraps now. That's a new removal spell we saw out of the Bant decks and the green-white decks, but now you've moved into this deck as well.
Yeah, I was a little afraid of playing against the Bant decks with Silk Wrap just because of Dromoka's command. I didn't want to be overly vulnerable to it. But Hangerback Walker is so much of a problem, at times that I feel like if you can get a Silk Wrap on a Hangerback Walker, then it doesn't matter if they have Dromoka's Command or not, right? Because the creature gets exiled, it comes back with no counters on it, and Silk Wrap, Roast was in that slot, and Roast does work nicely with Soulfire Grandmaster.
Yep.
And it does kill like Siege Rhino, but Silk Wrap just getting rid of Hangerback Walker while also still killing Anafenza and any other cheap guy is pretty sweet. You can fall pretty far behind sometimes against an Abzan deck or a green-white or Bant deck just because they can play like an early Warden of the First Tree, and if you don't have a red source and a Fire Impulse on turn 1 sometimes, you just need that 2-mana removal spell to catch back up. And Roast versus Silk Wrap it's marginal, but I just want a little more help against Hangerback Walker, mostly because I removed the Jeskai Charms from my deck due to the mana constraints.
All right. Yeah, you've kind of changed the mana around because you're no longer caring about casting Manus Rider on 3. You have more black sources. You can kind of do that kind of stuff. Also, Utter In, Colligan's Command, we already mentioned that, Ojutai's Command. New ones in the main deck, though, we've got Disdainful Stroke and Planner Outburst.
Yeah, so
this is the good one here. We haven't seen this one get a ton of play outside of like the pure Esper or the black control or the white control decks.
Yeah, so I think it's important when you build a Dig Through Time deck is that you have specific one of cards that can get you out of sticky situations, and Wingmate Rock is a sticky situation in and of itself. And the one copy of Planar Outburst helps clean up all the Gideon tokens after you've Utter Ended it, or just it buys you a lot of time in matchups that are just very creature based, or against decks that are just creature dense, and it also kills them sometimes.
Right.
I've definitely done the back-to-back turns of Planar Outburst, Jace minus Planar Outburst, hit you for 8, so it happens. Whatever.
Seems pretty powerful.
It's a win condition.
Yeah. A Disdainful Stroke, you got another on the board, kind of trying to hedge against these bigger decks, these ramp decks.
Yes and no. Those cards are good against the ramp decks, but mostly by cutting Manus Rider, I'm making myself a lot more vulnerable to Gideon, allies Zendikar, and having access to 3 2-mana counter spells that can handle it early in the game, I think is important if I'm not going to be playing Manus Rider. And some people like Dispel, but I think Dispel is much better when you're trying to protect a specific creature like Mantis Rider or Tasigur, and Negate and Disdainful Stroke are much better when you're trying to win the super long game and just make sure that you don't lose to those like 4 and 5 drop spells.
Right. Moving to the sideboard here, you mentioned in the article one of the weaknesses of this deck is just the green-red Eldrazi deck, basically. You are no longer trying to fear that. You have 3 infinite obliteration. Count them, 3 infinite obliteration.
I really wish I remembered the guy's name, but there's one guy in the comment section of my article this week that said, this deck just loses to green-red Eldrazi ramp. And I said, yeah, I talked about
You're not wrong.
in my article. I thought it was funny.
Well, you're looking out for him here. You've got an answer.
I had 2 this week when I was testing, and I was like, I don't want to lose to ramp, so I'm just going to play 3. If I name a Ulamog with infinite obliteration, all I have to deal with at that point is Ugin, and if I can find Utter End or some counter spells, it's usually not that bad. So,
right.
Especially after sideboard.
Right. Kind of the new emergence of this Esper Tokens deck, too. We saw it at the Grand Prix last weekend. Virulent Plague is a card that's been around, but now it looks to be very well positioned. You got a copy in here you can find with all your dig through times.
Yeah, the Virulent Plague I think is it's pretty useful against that deck, but it just has value in some other matchups too. I mean, some of the Atarka Red decks are now going back to playing like the full 4 Hordeling Outburst, and so I'm usually bringing it against them along with like the Radiant Flames. But yeah, I mean, Virulent Plague just knocks out the Sorin tokens, the Gideon tokens, and all the Secure the Waste. So I mean, it's a good one of.
Yeah.
I like it as a one.
Seems like a great bullet. Of course, you got a Ration Cleric. You need that against red. You can bring it back with Ojutai's Command. Got some more counter spells, Dispel, Disdainful Stroke. Now, Painful Truths is like the card drawer of choice you kind of bring in against the more grindy decks.
Yeah, so any deck that doesn't have a lot of reach, like green-white, where you're after board, you're just going to be super dense with the removal. All you want to do for like the first 3 turns is just kill creatures, and then after that, you're just trying to find anything that draws you cards to find more removal. Whether that's Dig Through Time or Painful Truths, it doesn't really matter. You can usually afford to pay the 3 life, especially if you have an early Soulfire Grandmaster going, and you're able to just gain a bunch of life with Fire Impulse and Crackling Doom.
Okay. Other than that, you got some enchantment hate between Felidar Cub and Erase, but also Mastery of the Unseen. We saw this card really shine. A lot of the Jeskai decks aren't really able to deal with it.
Yeah, I mean,
outside of the Cub, of course.
Right. Mostly because of like how powerful some of the enchantments and artifacts and random things are in Standard is the reason why I'm playing 2 Utter Ends. And like against Green-White, they're going to be bringing in Mastery, sometimes Evolutionary Leap, and my Utter End's going to be really taxed against things like their Gideons, their Deathwish Raptors, and their Hangerback Walkers. And so I want to have a Race and a Felidar Cub. One of each I think is fine because they're going to be a lot of different cards that allow you to rebuy them. Like Jace allows you to rebuy the Erase if you need to. It's also instant speed, so you can unlock one of your creatures from Silk Wrap, untap with it on a fully mana charged board. Whereas Felidar Cub has a little bit better recursion because you have 5 ways to bring it back, as opposed to needing to flip Jace to bring back the Erase. Yep. The Mastery of the Unseen, though, in any sort of slow, grindy mirror that doesn't have Dromoka's command, I'm usually bringing it in, and it's usually going to win the game when I cast it.
All right. Well, the deck looks great. You've played a lot of Jeskai Black here. It'll be interesting to see how you do in a tournament setting now that you've gone away with the Manus Rider. Let's see how you turned out. So.
Yeah. Here's hoping.
All right, Todd, thanks for joining me here in the Sideboard. Stay tuned to StarCityGames.com all weekend long for the action here in Philadelphia.